Hi there everybody, this is David, and I've just got to say, of the Final Fantasy games, my favorite ones, still to this day, I think, are the three that were released back on the SNES 4, 5, and 6. And I've always been looking for like another Final Fantasy game in that same mold, in that same vein, and I think that we finally have one out with Final Fantasy Resonance, and I want to tell you why. And it's definitely worth a sub as you come and you join the party and you level on up with me. Thank you so much for your sub, your like, and your brand new hype. It helps me out a ton. So we had a new interview with IGN of the two producers, the producer and the director of Final Fantasy Resonance, and they're sharing quite a lot of insights about the game. They said that they started planning this game, coming up with the idea and all that kind of stuff about 6 or 7 years ago, but the actual development of the game didn't take that long. It was much shorter. So, in case the game does perform well, it won't take nearly as long for them to make a Final Fantasy Resonance 2, which would adapt the later seasons of Brave Exvius into a sequel. If you don't know, this Resonance is taking Brave Exvius Season 1 and turning it into its own console RPG. Whereas it used to be more episodic in nature, like you would do your scenario, then you go to a menu, and then you would choose the next one. Now they've turned it really into something that you would see on the SNES, where you would go into a town, talk to the townsfolk, realize what the problem is, go into a dungeon on the overworld map, figure out the problems, and then move on to the next town, just like you did in the SNES games. This seems like really freaking amazing to me. He's also talking about how they had to overhaul the storyline and make it something really special, really to really fit those games. For example, they say that this game focuses a lot more on the crystals than any other Final Fantasy game has before. They say that that's really integral to its story. Not only that, there's airships, there's chocobos, there's summoned monsters, there's all sorts of stuff, and they say that their very first Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy V, and that's still the one that he enjoys the most, and he goes back and he plays that game a lot because he loves the exploration aspect. He says, I wanted to go back and relive and re-experience the classic fun of the Final Fantasy games of back then on the SNES. The producer says, personally, I loved 4, 5, and 6. You know, the ones released on the SNES. I experienced those games in real time. So did I, except, you know, I'm a stupid American, so we didn't get 5, or Final Fantasy Expert, as they wanted to call it back then, but I grew up on 1, so I'm even more of an OG than this guy. Yeah, 3rd grade, beat that on the NES, yeah. So he says, you know, I know these stories are about saving the world, but it allowed you to play at your own pace, and as you see fit, and they come with unique characters, with unique personalities, which is not everyone can do everything, like we've been seeing lately. He enjoyed building his own party with those characters. He enjoyed the customization of that as well. And he's drawing on those experiences to make this game, and it's such a breath of fresh air. The reason why they're doing this is because they say the current Final Fantasy landscape has been moving into a 3D direction. They're kind of taking some shots at their own employer. They're saying it's moved to a 3D direction. The more recent games have more action-based gameplay elements and 3D graphics, and it's jam-packed with a lot of content, and it's quite dense. And that's becoming the mainstream Final Fantasy experience of this day, so they want to bring in a different kind of Final Fantasy experience, a slower kind of Final Fantasy experience here, and I am all about it. They say, if you imagine that we took Final Fantasy 4, 5, and 6, and then we made a game 30 years later in that same vein, this game would be that game. It would match something that people might experience that comes after those past entries. So they're basically saying, like, this is the true successor to those SNES games, and that's what they wanted to achieve. Another thing that they wanted to achieve was taking the job system of 5 as well as the special abilities of 6 and kind of molding those two together into one. He goes on to talk about the visions. He says, we want to make sure that all the characters have their own unique visions. We have 20 plus visions in this game, but we don't want any of those characters to actually go to waste. So we don't want like the first vision to be like super weak and the last vision to be super strong. We want all of them to be balanced and equal with one another so that you can really, use them all and put them all into your party, which I think is great. And that's one of the key factors I think that made Final Fantasy V so special. You could beat the game with the very first job classes. In fact, some of the very first job classes, like the Blue Mage, were some of the most powerful job classes in the entire game. Yeah, there were special job classes towards the end, like the Mime, but nothing was too overpowered. Everything had its own unique role, and I think that that's really important. They also talk about the special skills in Final Fantasy VI in the same way, saying that everybody's skills were of equal value. Although I kind of don't think so. If you take Celeste's runic and Edgar's tools and put them, against each other, Celeste is going to get creamed by Edgar's tools. So I don't know what he's talking about there. Maybe balance that a little bit better, but I know what he's trying to say. He says the overarching direction that we gave the team when developing this battle system was to see whether we could find a really good blend of Final Fantasy V's job system, where the enjoyment is about party customization, but then also incorporate elements of the unique character traits that you really see in Final Fantasy VI. He says that it's hard to get right, but he's really doing it. He's trying to achieve that goal, and he's trying to make this I don't want to say Final Fantasy VII because there already is one, but as if Final Fantasy VII came out on the SNES and it was a true successor to 4, 5, and 6, if that makes any sense. He says, I still believe that there is room to grow, evolve, and advance, even for pixel art turn-based games at this time in the moment. And he's incorporating new technologies into these pixel art games by going back and he's looking at the indie RPGs of the day. He's also looking at the AAA turn-based RPGs, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, obviously, and he's saying, what are these people doing that we are not doing? I think that they're finally realizing that they're behind the trend. They're finally realizing that they're not setting the trend anymore. They're behind the trend. And now they need to study that trend, and they need to figure out where they went wrong, and they need to course correct. And that's what they're doing, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's very smart, and I think it's a very good thing that they're doing, that they don't have such hubris to say, we're still the best, we're leading the pack, everybody else follows us as they go when the train crashes. You know what I mean? They're actually stopping, they're pausing, and they're saying, what are other people doing? How can we do this as well? How can we take what they're doing and incorporate it into our games? How can we take it and maybe even make it better? He's saying there's still very much a future for these 2D games, for these turn-based RPGs, for these SNES style games. So he's looking forward to that. He's looking forward to this game coming out, this renaissance of turn-based RPGs, and he's looking forward to even putting out more sequels of this, because he said, this one didn't take all that long to do, and if it is successful, that they'll do more seasons of this, which is so freaking amazing. I think that Octopath Traveler 0, which is Champions of the Continent, they did such a good job adapting that into a console game. And there's so much more. They could make an Octopath Traveler 0 2. You know what I'm saying? They could do that for that game. And they could do the same thing here by taking the seasons and adding more and more and more. And I am all about this, y'all. I am so excited for this. But now I want to hear from you. What do you think about all this news? Let me know down in the comments, and as always, have a good day.